Hi.
Hey, we're a team. Go team.
Tony is pretty.
I love it.
Someone who's leading charge.
Oh, I think Tony can go with this. So Tony is going to today talk to you. So leading off from the briefing you just had from NZTA. This is a little bit different to the other LTP sessions in that Tony is going to first talk about the Transport Network Plan, which is the broader plan that we're developing, similar to what NZTA has done, but with a broader scope. And then he'll flow that through into the infrastructure strategy conversation, in a similar format to what we've done for the other areas in the infrastructure strategy. So I'll just hand it over to Tony to go through it. Oh.
The tree, please.
Yep.
It's on there. Thank you all. Yeah, this was originally two presentations, two separate subjects, but they've been combined into one, so the information that's been circulated to you does contain a part A and a part B. I'll just introduce each section as we go. Sorry, first of all, talking about the Transport Network Plan, this is an essential part of the regional deal. Very important piece of work which enables us to really take a little bit of a breath and examine or re-examine where we are in terms of.
Hang on, who's got the big on? Turn yourself on.
So the Transport Network Plan is a way to really take a breath and say, where are we in our current planning?
So I've just got, I need yours. I'm like, do you want to share this? Do I have to be sharing the presentation?
Okay.
Just need to share it. That's what I was checking. And the sound came through. Just minimize that completely. I'll keep it on.
Cool.
Right, sorry, Tony, start again.
Take three. Part A, Transport Network Plan. Transport Network Plan is the opportunity for us to take a breath and understand where we are in terms of our improvements program, our forward planning for transport. And at this particular junction, there are a number of work streams combining, which enable us to look not just through district, but with our transport partners and across into Central Otago as well. I do want to point out there are a number of different transport work streams happening at the same time. And traditionally around this time in the LTP cycle, it gets quite complicated because the program that we put up has to go through various stages, through our own long-term plan, through the regional and national versions of those to be prioritised to attract funding. This time we have a little bit more going on as well as the regional deal, identifying that we need this particular element, the Transport Network Plan. We also have the work that you've just heard from the Transport Agency around their strategic network plan, which is a different scope to ours. So trying to combine all these things together with our usual program of work through Way to Go and provide all the strategic inputs and the sort of forward understanding through our spatial planning, structure planning, responses to fast tracks, means that there are a number of work streams all happening at the same time. We don't have the luxury of sequencing. We're trying to make them all work at the same time. Very importantly, when it comes to the long-term plan, however, if we don't include projects and programs in this, then it doesn't go forward into the other two to even be considered for joint planning or funding. The Transport Network Plan itself, transforming transport. We are one of the fastest growing regions in the country. We know that. Our neighbours also have problems. We're combining the two together to try and understand where we're at in terms of what we've planned and maybe not delivered at this point. The purpose of the Transport Network Plan is to bring together as much of the previous information in terms of programme business, long-term plans, other studies, and identify where we are at this time. The second phase of that is then to start looking forward on how we prioritise that jointly to understand the wider picture, the picture that affects the transport network, which isn't limited to our boundaries or to the organisations who charge us. Geographic scope includes all of Queenstown Lakes District and key urban centres and connecting corridors in the Central Otago District. The content scope includes all land-based transport modes. It's not air, it's not rail, but it's everything that we're usually talking about in the transport sphere. The idea behind the Transport Network Plan and how we bring it together is by jointly identifying what good looks like for all of us. And that is simply a planned, agreed programme of interventions, an implementation plan confirmed, funding confirmed, and our growth areas supported through our spatial planning, our regional spatial plans. It also gives us a very defensible position to say where we have unplanned development coming to us, what our position is and what the network can cope with. Stages of development of this particular document. Firstly, to define the current state. We're pretty much there. We held a workshop yesterday with the Regional Deal Working Group. So the project team have been building a document which we're testing, make sure we've got the right current status. And we've also started now looking forward. Where do we need to take that? What's most important to us? And that will give us a way to set out how we prioritise those interventions and how they are joined together. We're aiming for the deliverables to be available to us mid to late August, and so the document will be completed and taken through the regional deal work stream early September. The links and overlaps with the strategic network plan, you've just been hearing about these. I'll jump to the couple ones down the bottom. The common features are really the recognition that major transport projects not attracted committed funding through existing funding mechanisms. A little bit of discussion about that previously is that we recognise that we are doing the business cases, we are following the approach that we are obliged to do, but it's not resulting in direct funding of projects. Different approach to funding is required, and that's another issue, or that's another element of the regional deal. But in essence, the projects are still the same. They're looking at the physical infrastructure, services, which is mainly around public transport services, and then the behavioural change, travel, demand management. So there are overlaps between them. Linked with the proposed regional deal is that the strategic network plan and the transport network plan, although they cover in different geographic areas, do need to be as aligned as we can make them. We do need to cover other significant areas such as offline public transport, and we do need to come up with a way to finance these extended projects and programs that will be put forward. Relationships are really just looking to the centre there. The transport network plan is obviously a wider geographic scope than the strategic network plan from the Transport Agency. Also, we are incorporating all the previous work that we can find that is relevant, including some which is happening right now, and then going to take that forward, being informed by a consolidated document to inform our long-term plans, to inform our regional spatial plans, our infrastructure strategies in the future, and to work within the regional deal framework. Opportunities for the Transport Network Plan is really to bring together as many joint opportunities as we can. Priorities with them to support each other's projects and programs is where the detail will be. We recognise that there is a shift needed in how we fund things. We recognise that there will still be short, medium and long term, but the commitment to that program, rather than being something which changes every 3 years, is necessary. And for QLDC, I'm going to suggest when we get on to the second part of this, that that's more of a 10-year focus than a 30-year. Opportunity from this document is to inform our forward planning again. In the same way transport was a key element of our spatial plan, this will be a key element or key layer in the regional spatial plan. Also part of this, as I say, we're working with partners. There are a number of ongoing projects particularly with the regional council. There's a list here of some of the work they are doing. Wanaka and Upper Clutha and the sub-regional public transport network. I'll show you a couple of slides on the progress of those. They're also working on the Wakatipu network, but we've been asked not to share that at this particular time because it's still very much a work in progress, and I'll identify a timeline. I'll also cover a little bit about the offline mass rapid transport, which will just further the conversation from the previous meeting. These have been shared with us from the regional council. Just to give you a little bit of a snapshot here, Upper Clutha, their emerging preferred option, what a public transport 2-year trial could look like, which is a system which they could then be extended. They're also considering how they work in a sub-regional network, connecting Queenstown, Wanaka, Cromwell, but also extending through to Clyde and Alexandra, which fits very well with the transport network planning. They've given us an indicative time frame, which I won't dwell on, but you can see the works are underway at this time. And as I said, just a quick comment in and around the offline mass rapid transport. We all understand that at some point the rolling capacity will be as such that we need to find another solution. What that particular solution is has not been decided at this point, but clear from us that there are certain things we would like that system to do or that mode to do. And for QLDC, that would be a service that supports our planned growth, a route that is protected so we can rely on it, integrated with our other transport modes, and it complements our planned interventions, not replaces them. We do still have a significant program of our own to push on with, as we'll talk about in the second part of this session. We want it to be affordable. We want it to have some relation to the existing public transport service, and we want it to be accessible so that it covers as much of the areas, particularly the growth areas, as we can make it. That's a skip through what the transport network plan is and when it will come. It is a work in progress also. We are aiming for a couple of months more work to tie that together. Happy to take any questions.
Okay. I know Russ will present to us later, and when we spoke, he's like, you know, transport network plan, transport network plan, transport network plan. We've done these plans every triennium for decades and nothing ever changes. Do you feel like you've got confidence or that there's targeted investment or that we know enough to be able to actually create action this term?
Yes, is a very short answer, but I think we're better informed than we have been, and agree that it's the lack of the delivery of the program which is missing, not the relevance and the accuracy of the planning.
And that's why this process and actually NZTA's strategic network plan review has been able to happen in what is actually a very short time frame for transport planning and transport planning terms, because there is a huge amount of existing information that those two processes are calling on. It's really just updating them and trying to bring them into a more integrated program. The funding and financing conversation is going to be a really important one in terms of how we get it delivered.
So I understand that those public transport schemes, the Wanaka and the interregional one, they meet a BCR of greater than 1, do they, in both cases?
The first one was identifying the BCR. I'm not sure about the second one.
The interregional one?
The Wanaka one.
The Wanaka one was 1.1.
I think it was 1.1.
Yeah.
Again, that's indicative.
Yeah.
Complete.
They're still in that earlier phase for the sub-regional one. Yeah, they're still in that process.
And obviously it's up to the region council, but they haven't identified how the targeted rates would apply. They obviously have to apply to the Upper Clutha as well in that case.
Back one slide, you've got capacity for more PT vehicles, which I think definitely need that. Could we have and an online system rather than, or can we have both? It says more capacity for PT vehicles or an offline system. We can probably see a future with both of those coming.
I think in line with the previous discussion, I think more capacity depends. You could take that as being more capacity on the vehicle, larger, longer articulated vehicles, as well as you could even more clear vehicles, as well as an offline system.
As well as, yeah, just so that is sort of indicates one or the other, but probably both.
Could be both.
Yeah.
I think this sentence was intended to talk about having to create more road space for the capacity for the PT vehicles, which is what is the constraint. Yeah.
Going back to statutory
We need
interpretation, or can mean and
Yeah.
in that context.
And then the slide before that, so it says late 2026 draft GPS released. I guess that comes, just thinking back to last time around, that came before an election. And then 2027, we got LTP adoption. From the memory from last time there's another step after that was GPS adoption. The GPS adoption, yeah, which was different than the draft.
So the GPS is going to be probably a bit of a different process this time. So there's still lack of clarity on when exactly that is going to be released. We had indications it wasn't going to be before the election. Now it seems like it might be, but there's a bit of uncertainty about the timing on the draft GPS. Yeah.
Could be released directly after a poll, and there's a dip in the. And they need something to announce.
In respect of it, we'll probably see we won't have definition of the GPS until after council's adopted its LTP, which is the issue that we face each time.
Yeah, and that's, I mentioned that earlier too, and that's my recollection from last time too. We put a lot of work into what we put on the LTP, and we had to change a lot of it. So what was in the GPS? Yeah.
Absolutely. So one of the conversations we'll be having this time with the different approach to funding and financing is we'll be explicitly asking you when we get to the capital program stage whether you are willing to fully fund it if it doesn't receive funding at the point that we're having the discussion in the next couple of months, rather than that being a discussion that we have later if a FAR is not achieved.
It's tricky not knowing whether it's a funding class or something under the, it is, because, and obviously we made that decision last time to fund the schools to pool, but equally, fully fund the schools to pool, but equally we then got transport choices funding and stuff to assess, so it was sort of a.
So if we get to that point again, you'll need to decide the prioritisation for funds that are already decided on and committed as to whether we spend that or not. We know that there was a lot of projects that were not funded and were not able to proceed with that. So that's the kind of reality again, I suspect.
Just a really quick one on offline mass rapid transport. Is this our opportunity to feed into QLDC requirements from PT from offline rapid transport or not? So I guess what I'm saying is there's some criteria here: affordable, accessible, complements planned interventions. Is this the last time we'll look at criteria and feeding in? Might sound like a random question, but
No, these are very general and high level, what we want to see and how they would link to the growth areas in the spatial plan.
because resilience and, you know, equitable access and, you know, what does accessibility mean? I'm just making sure that this isn't the opportunity. Thanks.
ORC will be likely running that process. They'll have their own criteria, which I'll be fairly certain covers those things, but there'll be an opportunity in that process to feed into it formally. This is just kind of our key thoughts on the things related to the network plan.
Thanks.
There we go. Seeing those requirements is really good. I think that's going to help with our next conversation. I wonder if there might be another one along the lines of what Nikki's suggesting, which is something like the sustainability of options. You know, some of them are more likely to continue into the future, taking into account change, but it's kind of rhetorical. I wonder if, so we're talking about, Tony, at the start, about the improvements program, quote unquote, and a lot of what, you know, looking at this stuff's good stuff, like what you're presenting is very good. Sometimes it's how we communicate these things. I mean, improvements says one thing. A title like critical capacity enhancement program adds more immediacy to it. Is it required to use improvements, or can we be more sort of proactive in our language around it to get more attention?
I think what we're doing is following the sort of set out process through long-term planning and through the NZTA, which gives us a continuous and an improvements program with set dates to enter that information into a process.
Yeah.
What we call that when we took the motive plan that we created, we gave it a different title to emphasise what that was.
Good. You mentioned a 10-year focus rather than 30-year focus. I like the sound of that. What are your drivers to that? The regional deal, or the urgency of the need to it, or are there other considerations why you think it should be 10 rather than 30?
Well, I'll come on to those in the next part, but yes, it is the fact that we, right back to 2015, we were looking at a 30-year plan for interventions.
Yeah.
That 30-year point was when we get a certain amount of growth, if this is the capacity, if this is the infrastructure, this is the service, that will work. That was 10 years ago. We've now got more intensification, faster growth, more volumes to deal with.
Yeah.
So that program needs to shrink into a time when it now needs to be delivered. We've had a 10-year period where it hasn't. We've now got a shorter period to make that happen. None of the need has gone away. It's still there. It's just we need to go quicker.
We do. We need to get on. Thank you very much for that clarification. Cheers.
Question?
Okay, this is all due September this year. Yeah, great.
And again, it's still that very high level.
Yeah.
It's not going out into implementation. There will be further work required.
Yeah.
This is to set out that direction and joint direction where we need to go.
Thanks, Tom.
Suppose the only reflection, obviously, we've got some difficult prioritisation to make, and it's going to be an interesting process going through that. And I mean, the one that came up before, the Edith Cabell, is going to be super interesting because, you know, trying to balance the difference between getting it as early as we can and making it affordable, you know, and being affordable is going to be almost impossible challenge. But yes, anyway, good. That's, yeah, and it's not just simple as when we'd like to have it. It's sort of, there's a whole bunch of other things about affordability and about levering money and about all sorts of other things.
And who benefits?
And who benefits and who's paid for it. Yeah. So, have you anticipated how the development levies work will play into this? Because that's going to play a big part in affordability, of course.
Yeah, so this is one of the areas where we will be hoping, but as I said when we talked about this previously, this is all new and we're doing it this time. We'll be hoping to have a closer look at, be able to have a good focus on what the growth impacts really are, how we can recover potentially more from growth, but how we can use other tools. So time of use charging, parking charges, tolls, as well as things like IFFAs, which might enable us to capture those, target the costs of growth in a different way. So this is a program that we'll probably be looking to rank all of those alternative tools, because this is a significant program, but it's also a program where those tools really lend themselves for use here. Some of those can also potentially be used to capture costs from visitors, differently to costs from residents. So that will be an important consideration as well.
Edith Cabell's, once again, a super interesting one, is how do you assign level of service versus growth of Edith Cabell, in that it's an end of life bridge.
Mm-hmm.
We need, active travel, which is a new level of service probably that doesn't exist on the current one, but there's also one of the big drivers is clearly growth. So, I mean,
yep.
It'll be interesting to see how that one plays out.
Yeah.
Closely.
We're interested too.
I can answer that directly. We've been working across to the NZTA investment team. We've done a recent update to the business case for Arthur's Point Crossing, and all those elements come into it: resilience, growth, the state of the existing structure, how we put those together, how we understand what and when is needed, redoing the costs and benefits of that to make sure we're still very current in those. And that's the work we're just finalising that.
We're sort of being pulled in two directions though, because if we play into NZTA's criteria, we're trying to you know, make resilience and things a priority. They are effectively level of service questions for council, not growth things, and we want to load it as much as we can to growth. Whereas that's going to be pushing us back in the other direction to say, well, we need a bridge that's not going to fall down at the next earthquake. So that's an interesting conundrum for us to find that balance.
Yeah, I think it is an interesting conundrum, but fundamentally, at one level, it is a resilience question. The bridges has to be replaced, and you wouldn't replace with a single lane bridge to maintain that level of service. So it would be illogical to put in a small bridge there, given that. So it's principally a resilience component, a network, and we've said to NZTA we think it's a critical resilience issue for the estate highway connection and into Queenstown. So that's its principal requirement. And levels of service clearly wouldn't replace with a single lane bridge, just a double lane bridge.
Yeah.
Well, and you can only account for an equivalent level of service if you're to put on the existing ratepayers, but at a modern. Anyway, that's the trick. It's really it's not easy because,
But ultimately,
like you say, you wouldn't replace like with like because it wouldn't be. But that's the level of service that we've currently funded, or at least not funded but adopted from history.
So, and that's what we went through as part of that, how will it be funded? I don't think those questions have been answered yet. So.
No, nor should they be really, because although you could come up with some notional criteria and analysis of where the costs sit, but really that's a policy decision, because there are other drivers in that space. We want to give a signal to the market, getting back to the earlier discussions, to say that we actually don't want quite as much growth in the way that it's happening. Therefore, if more of that cost is put onto growth, future growth, then it's less attractive. And it's also balancing the situation that we've had for generations, where the existing residents, and there's more and more of them over time, and ratepayers have been subsidising growth that has been to some extent to their benefit, but on the other extent has been detrimental to life here. So that's a policy decision informed by that analysis.
What is, I suppose the point being is that if you didn't have growth, you wouldn't actually require any more than a one-lane bridge. But you need a new one-lane bridge because the old one's going to fall down. So it's this, but then, like you said, you wouldn't replace it. You wouldn't build a one-lane bridge because you've got both growth and you've got expectations of changes.
Two one-lane bridge.
Yeah. There's a policy required around how we attribute the cost.
Yeah.
Because the driver is different from the consequential.
But the activity class, we're relying on from NZTA will rely heavily upon the end of life structure and the resilience factor. So
yes, it's in our hands.
I'm just wondering whether we want to move on to part B.
Yeah, please, sorry. Yeah.
These conversations.
We're sort of diving into some of it already, which is.
Sorry, we're getting ahead of you.
No, it's all good. It's all relevant. So we'll go into the next piece. If I can remember which way the wheel goes.
Other way. There you go.
Into the infrastructure strategy. As I said at the head of this, with so many work streams going on, trying to synthesize that down into a direction for the future, acknowledging all these different programs, partnerships, is quite difficult. But hopefully we'll come up with a way to identify not a billion individual projects, but a way to group those together and look at area-based or program-based approach to that. Talked a little bit about the deficiencies, and that really relates to the point we made earlier about the timing of this. And again, I really need to reiterate that strongly. 2015, 2018 LTP, we were into very long-term planning, expecting a level of growth. Everything's gone faster. We're intensifying. We're seeing a lot more primary development. We're seeing higher numbers in our identified growth areas. It's all coming quicker, but the delivery of the projects in the QLDC program haven't kept up. So identifying, as we talk about these wider issues, there are lots of people involved in the transport conversation, transport agency, regional council, partners over the border in CODC, but we still have a significant program of works which is still required. So looking into our own infrastructure strategy, we'll get the right way in a minute. The significant issues in context we've been through, most of it is around keeping up with that growth and providing a level of service that keeps the network operating. So we'll skip through those. Strategic direction on objectives, how we intend to address this, is really, again, to recognise where other people's work is, but also then to factor in what we need as QLDC. And it's not always the bits which are the loudest. The growth in the Eastern Corridor, Southern Corridor, a lot of that will be implemented by the transport agencies, projects, a lot by the regional councils, public transport projects. There is still a lot more that we need to focus on. So for QLDC, breaking the problem up, if you like, into 4 areas or 4 programs. First one we go to is a toolkit approach, which is, if you like, the minimum that we really need to do. And that's continuing on with certain key programs. Travel demand management, the behavioural change in the designers, the people who plan land use, as well as the users. Parking management, network planning, as we're doing in the transport network plan, to understand the bigger picture and how it works together. And using technology in terms of intelligent transport systems. Again, the technology side doesn't need to be transport only, but that's a key step to being able to manage our parking permits, monitoring that, and when we investigate further into time of use charging, possibly tolls, is having that technology in place. Again, a lot of these are not just QLDC, but they are key toolkit items.
And those intelligent transport systems are a key part of what we need to be able to have a variable charging system in all of those spaces for residents versus visitors. Understanding that the definition of a resident versus visitor is not an easy definition, but
and the next area is Wanaka Upper Clutha, which has a culture which is very suited to walking, cycling, solving problems, and doing the right thing in terms of marrying up its infrastructure to its community. We have the opportunity to promote that. We have identified somewhere in the region of 30 smaller projects through a business case approach. We could implement them over the next 10 years. We would see additional growth through the 2 new structure plan areas that will be added. But there is also an opportunity to condense this to really advocate for that culture to be reinforced from us. And by bringing those projects in earlier, we would hopefully prevent a whole lot of the Queenstown type issues from being established in Wanaka. There will still be further ongoing work, but we've identified that relatively small costs, years 1 to 3, around the $50 million mark, is something we could implement a year of planning, a couple of years of delivery, to make a significant difference very, very early in the program. Top-up programs, top-up work from that still continue, but that's solving an issue which is almost a separate area to look at. Queenstown Town Centre, again, slightly different, but we can separate this out. Queenstown has long been the economic jewel. Travellers are coming here, visitors want to be here, locals want to be here, upset when they can't be. Spending money here will allow us to do our original intentions back on to 2015, Plan Change 50, growing the town centre, allowing us to expand. There are a number of larger projects that haven't been progressed at this time. They've been put into the 30-year plan. They've been drawn back to around the 10-year edge, but now it's time to bring them into that within that first 10-year period. These projects want to bring up the names and costs. We get a reaction to them. Arterial stage 3, 132 million. Arterial stage 2, 98 million. For the public transport interchange, we've got the rest of the street upgrades. And we know that our parking facilities haven't been implemented at this time, so there's a significant cost there. There are a number of projects that we still have, still required for the circulation of the town centre. The more we grow, the more service vehicles, the more public transport, the more use we get, and there's still a need to invest in this space. Leaving them longer and longer becomes more complicated, as we found out when developers are building up to that arterial edge, possibly encroaching on it, and the certainty that we don't have until we progress this into the next stage of design. It also gives us more detailed costs for what we need to do. Identifying these projects as still being required, again, is a program area or an area-based approach in itself.
Just quickly on. I mean, sentiment of going on this in Queensland's economic powerhouse is like $170 million invested in arterials and town street upgrades. Do you have an economic assessment of what that's returned?
Not specifically at this time. We're relying on the previous business cases at this moment.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, it's hard to make a statement that the reinvestment is a good return on investment if you use that as a framework for considering your initial.
The reason it wasn't funded through the NLTP is that it didn't have a good return on investment, didn't have a good BCR.
Yeah.
But given that it went overpriced by 2.5 times, it would have an appalling BCR.
Yeah, and I'm sort of the same point. I think we need to be really careful about throwing out these assumptions about what people want and what they're upset about at the moment. And I don't think it's not being able to company to go shopping. And I think we need to be careful about throwing that out in public workshops. You know, what are the assumptions that are underpinning the direction that we're taking? We need to test them and make sure they're still realistic. We need to be thinking, you know, it is expensive to live here as one of the key problems we're trying to solve. Are we growing in the most expensive place? Are we trying to enable development in the most expensive place? Is it the best place to grow? At some point, smart growth, we have to have those discussions about, you know, what are the trade-offs of continually enabling growth in the town centre versus other parts of the district. So I just want some care to be taken, because I don't want to go into the LTP with those being the fundamental assumptions that are underpinning the staff's recommendations.
So I think in terms of those particular ticket items, of which Tony said, you know, stage 3, stage 2, parking building, what was it? Oh, the
Speed upgrades.
speed upgrades.
Change.
They are things that you'll be able to debate and discuss. Are they things that you want to prioritise, given the funding requirements? You need to work that through. So
it's just a case of understanding those assumptions.
Being able to apply some objectivity to the decision making, one of the things that achieve the best outcomes, and I think that's the, you know, feels how can we most efficiently use the money to achieve the best outcomes is what we want to have some information on. But yeah, John.
Yeah, this will come up later, I'm sure, but it's also not how it used to use our money, but whose money.
Exactly.
Yeah, so, but also I wonder, it occurred to me early on at the piece when there was the outline of, you know, that the focus of this work is on essentially all of QLDC and some network of nodes and CODC. When getting to Nikki's point, really, it's not just saying, oh, Queenstown Town Centre does much of the stuff will be needed for capacity, critical capacity enhancement. But actually, if we're looking in the regional deal context, it's, yeah, sure, but might that money be better invested, if it is particularly it's public money, elsewhere in the sub-region to bring about similar outcomes? You know, so, and that's even within the 10 years you're talking about, Tony. So sometimes I think we need to just step back a little bit and go, okay, it's great for us, yes, we get those drivers, particularly some business interests, push that, and understandably, if you look at the bigger picture, there might be quicker, bigger, more meaningful wins elsewhere that we might need to think about.
I think you're right. I mean, the actual 10-year program here has got 650 million.
That's it all.
There needs to be some prioritisation in that, and so what's being presented is here is a list of potential CapEx, noting the, you know, Tony's comment around the underfunding in previous years, and you need to make some adjustment around that. Because it is, I mean, the replacement piece as well is fantastic.
Yeah.
If we can get it into the NLTP, we'll get 51%. You know, hopefully, from NZTA, but is that enough? Do we want to try more than that? And where does that then fit in terms of your priorities? and what's the balance between the solar and the other solar and some of that stuff. So we are in a fiscally constrained environment, so at some point there have to be some choices made.
We just need those be informed choices. So how do we get the information that we need to understand where we get the best
Yep.
bang for buck in terms of where we spend on growth?
So it'll come
Or
through.
So Tony can bring the existing information, a summary of that when we are talking about the capital program, but it might be that that needs to be refreshed, and that might be something we do in the early part before you do the next LTP, which is then you might then commit or not. So that's kind of what we've been talking about in terms of how you stage that as well. Because the decision making here isn't just when you commit to the LTP. It's also, you know, the LTP commits to a path, but you don't actually commit to the projects until the business case, in this case, updated, done, comes through the process, the investment case. That's one of the things Tany's been talking about lots since she started.
Like we said before, that you don't know until you, if you get the NZTA funding until later and all that stuff.
Oh, that's a slightly different thing.
You don't know what decisions ORC resolve through there. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And the last one was into the wider Waikato Basin. You'll see one of the first projects in here is subject to a few conversations already around Arthur's Point Crossing, but also the follow-on to that would be if we're successful in delivering the bridge structure itself, then we need to really re-examine the wider corridor, and that would be all the way from Gorge Road through Arthur's Point and out to where it reconnects back to the state highway network, possibly as far out as Arrow Junction. So hopefully a smaller projects just to ensure that that corridor is working to its full capacity. Other than that, then just looking wider, we talked about Park and Ride. We talked about the previous business case, which did identify a site on 516 Ladies Mile. A number of reasons that it didn't go forward. It required not just the PG services, but also the, as I recall, the roundabout to be in place at the intersections. And so configuration there. And we would have been helpful now. Yeah, and also there was still some uncertainty about the later use of 516 and a cost of around sort of 9-10 million to implement that project at the time. Yes, further work will need to be done on Park and Ride, but that is. Remember,
It's going to cost $9 or $10 million to put an at-ground car park at 516.
The cost at the time, I think, covered the physical works to the site, but also I can't remember it included the roundabout cost as well.
Right, which are now funded by NZTA. So,
Any developers.
and then, under agreement, So it'd be interesting to know what the residual cost of that project would be if you were to do a at-ground car park or Park and Ride it. But then there must be some sort of bus stop facility associated with it too, some sort of, Okay, anyway.
And then sorry, mate, go.
No.
When we talk about Park and Ride, is that only vehicular Park and Ride, or is there provision and, again, conceptual thinking around large-scale bike Park and Ride, so people can bike to the public transport, get on the public transport, leave their bike behind, come back, know that it's pretty likely to still be there when they get back?
I think the intention through the business case was for the car-based Park and Ride, as opposed to the connections to the interface with a bus service. I think that was the thinking at the time. Sure. It was all about a larger scale intervention at that time. Connecting, as we talked about earlier on about what flying system or any BT system, what looks good to that is the ability to connect with it, whether that's walk up, cycle up, or minimum amount of parking there to connect to that. If you take Park and Ride to look how we might connect to the community from Kingston or from Glenorchy, that might be a smaller facility on the periphery of the town to connect into that public transport.
That's something go on.
ORC very focused on the bus network being well integrated with active travel though. So when they talk about, or when we talk about the most multimodal system, I think I'm going to say that, multimodal system, you're talking about how you can integrate all of those different things. So this first mile, last mile
Yeah.
concept, ORC are really keen on making sure that any bus network or offline PT network is able to link into active travel really well.
Thank
But
you.
sort of, the idea that someone would drive from Bridesdale and park at 516, you've sort of lost the battle at that stage, haven't you? Because you've already put them up Howard's Drive, so it's, it doesn't solve the problem.
But they can easily bike.
But if they can get on the bus closer to home, or which they can, or you can, or do something else, you avoid them having to use the park and ride, it helps. Yeah.
There's also consequential costs of the park and ride scheme in terms of other opportunities which you can't use on that land.
Yeah.
And you've got, Ross coming along later on today, he talked about having a park and ride there at the terminal. I don't think there's any land for that yet, but there would be actually, there's quite a lost opportunity cost to turn that into a parking. It might be needed from a public transport point of view, but there's the other loss as well that you need to consider.
Sure, but with an integrated system, there might be better ways to skin that particular cat.
So in terms of the plan here, Tony, there's not, so this is a question, there isn't necessarily specific sites you're talking about.
No, I
It's
think
more saying that park and rides as part of the network, we're just anticipating they would be required.
Yep.
Yeah.
This isn't saying it would be a 516 or it would be wherever.
no, and that is a project that we need to update the previous work or complete new work. But again, that's very much in line with a joint approach to that. It's not simply ours. It's we need to work with the transport agency and the supplier of the PT services to make it effective.
The vulnerable roads piece. So how far along is it? When's it going to be completed and will it be in time for the LTP, and have you made any assumptions?
Very early scoping stage at this point. We've made little progress on.
So how do we go into LTP without understanding how we're approaching that?
At this point, we can only make a provision for it to be worked on.
So we make a provision for the project, we make a provision for the roads,
The budget.
which would, you'd be budgeting for the roads, which would then be, so I'm just thinking, in terms of putting money in for something that then we might not do, that's not okay. So would we, in terms of timing, are we looking at a piece of work, assume status quo for the first 3 years, and then the decision would be made in the next LTP round? Right, because to me, we can't put a provision in there funding for these roads, have people pay for them, then pull the service mid-flow. So does that, I'm just trying to get some certainty around this, because when we go into making decisions, knowing that a piece of work has been going on for some time, we sort of have a result, and it's complicated, and it's going to need community consultation. Would that be a reasonable approach?
The work in front of me is, as I say, is in the early scoping. We can't provide any more information at this time
Right. So
as to the extent of what that might be.
right. Okay.
So if that work is completed before we get to the next LTP, then there's provision to vary through an annual plan. The other option is to provide something and then vary the amount, but I don't know which of those we're planning on doing, Tony. At this stage.
So we haven't quantified anything yet. We don't know
So we
how
wouldn't be
far.
making any provision on it. Is that what
No,
you're saying?
there's existing provision which would be maintained unless we make a decision not to include provision for vulnerable roads. It's a cost to maintain those roads at the moment, have operational budgets. So
Okay.
in the absence of anything else,
Yeah,
that would
yeah.
carry on.
That you're talking about the additional.
Thing is, we've got in here assume status quo.
Remember, as I understand it, I'll need to check on that, but I'm pretty sure.
So for example, there's no provision made in here for a skipper's road solution.
So
There is.
this is the improvements program. So this will be looking at over and above what is already happening.
Right,
So we
easier.
haven't yet scoped what that might be.
Right.
So when
Okay,
you
this
say
isn't
already
an
happening, is this a spatial plan view of the world, or is it a spatial plan plus fast track view of the world? Would that be responding to you?
On vulnerable roads,
Sorry?
on vulnerable roads.
Would you?
In general, like when you're modelling this, like are you taking a spatial plan view or a spatial plan plus view? Like when you and not jumping back, but when you consider a park and ride, are you considering the fact that there could be 2,500 more houses in that catchment? or not?
Yes.
You are, so you're taking a view that fast track would or will happen.
Or is it no matter how you skin the cat, or it's going to create the same problems?
Well,
Some things
it's not
would
quite
need
as
to
clear as that, because if you add another 2,500 houses, you might invest in a different solution as the problem. It's not just a matter of saying this is the,
My read on this, and I've brought up my favorite image ever created, the WMP homepage, because I think it like goes through. Sorry, it goes through. This feels like a holistic strategy for how to integrate network, like people transporting around the district, including roads, but not, but different strategies of doing it. Park and roads, active travel, optimization, vulnerable roads, network optimization. It's a lot of information. But I think what's good about this image is that it puts all that information into a way that people can understand how it looks. It's a vision, essentially. And I think what I'm picking up on this is that the vision to move forward, both from the previous conversation and this, is we can't build another lane. We can't just build another intersection. It's a whole network approach with a whole bunch of different interventions in order to create a system that's going to suffer less than if we didn't. I think presenting that in this format would be really helpful, not just for us, but for any conversation that you're having and people like our community as well, who are, investing in this essentially.
So that is essentially what the Transport Network Plan will do. What we're trying to do here is go in parallel with the Transport Network Plan. This is essentially what we really know already. The Transport Network Plan will give the holistic view that you were talking about, and it might identify additional things, or it might say actually that thing that we thought was important, actually now it's looking not so important. And so that will come through in the later stages of this, as Tony talked about. It's not at the timing here.
I guess I agree, and not to say that this is what you need to do now, just to sort of add the provocation that who's your audience?
Yeah.
Is it MPs who are dealing with 300 other things? Is it the community who are interested in following this, but it's not tangible for it? So it's like, how do we get this information across in the easiest possible way so that people can understand? And what I'm picking up is it's more of this than it is anything else.
Yeah. Gaps on maps too.
Gaps on maps.
Yeah,
We're working on that for the capital
I
program.
love that. I'll figure out a way.
But we're not there yet.
so thinking about park and ride solutions elsewhere. And I think it's a really good challenging question about how much are we factoring in both growth and behaviour change. So in two instances that I've been involved in, one is just working in that context occasionally, but otherwise living in one, where as soon as park and ride facilities are established, often with existing, sometimes with new public transport, they are immediately oversubscribed by 3 times, because although when surveyed previously, they say, no, we won't use it, probably not. And then it's available, they do. So that's something we need to think about here, that all we're doing is shifting the problem back down the road a little bit, and it's a new problem, but it is alleviating part of the problem. So we need, I think it'll be useful to put some challenging thinking into that. And I think there's elements of that here. It's just something I think we need to keep an eye on.
What I'm just checking that I understand what you're asking is in the way the information is presented to you.
No, more so in that sort of the analysis that it makes. It doesn't just make the standard assumptions based on what I've seen in the work that's been done in business cases, etc. so far. It almost believes what people say when they're surveyed, which when we're talking about behaviour change in particular, people's behaviour can change much more quickly than they say it will. And so perhaps we need to build into this some room, so a flexible approach perhaps, but also look to make the most of these opportunities and build in as much of that, a bit like we're talking about recently about sports facilities, recreation facilities. it would be better to overdevelop, not necessarily invest, but ensure that there's capacity, because otherwise people get turned off and it has the reverse impact. So, but you're looking at a strategic level here, so I
But
suppose.
referring back to the Monica example,
Yeah.
condensing the program to encourage that behavioural change earlier.
Yeah.
would
Where
be
it's
the
already
criteria.
going that way.
Yes.
Cool. Thank you. Yes, just, I think there's an element here we need to keep an eye on. Thank you.
Sort of flicking back, but that might not be appropriate. I'm just significant key risks and uncertainties under the Queenstown Town Centre. Significant development areas, Lakeview, Manawa and the town centre extension are all assumed to be significantly implemented in years 1 to 10. I question that, that's all I want to say.
Yeah, and understand that. Understand that Lakeview is now under construction. They were always big elements in the town, the master plan.
Manawa was, sorry, but where's the investment in making that happen? Where's the, you know, so just in terms of prioritising, we do need to look at these key assumptions and see the extent to which they're driving things, because Lakeview is happening slowly, significantly behind where it could be, where the stage 2 happens in time. Big question marks there. Manawa, big question marks. Whether we're going to do anything, whether we can achieve land swaps with it. None of that may occur.
I've taken an action for us to take away and think about how we can present this town centre part, what additional information. I heard that you needed, that everybody seemed to want additional information about the economic benefits of economic and I guess the including the congestion related economic
Kind of amenity
benefits. And if we have any information on what those economic benefits are that we have achieved from the work that's already been invested in. So we'll have to think about that, and when we come back at the next session, we'll see what we can do about that for this process, or whether that needs to be part of the next stage. But that might inform your decision when we get to the, or not your decision, your direction, when we get to this next slide about which combination of these. So Tony will talk about his different pathways in terms of how to combine these. I note that one of them is not accelerating Wanaka and Wakatipu and having the Queenstown Town Centre slower, because based on Tony's knowledge of the network and the benefits and all of that, that's not one of the ones he's put forward. But so he'll talk through those pathways now, but that might be something we want to take into account when we have that discussion. Thanks.
Penny, was there anything else that you picked up that you were going to get more information on?
Yes, so I had a couple, actually before we go to the pathways, I also picked up to take back and have a discussion about the vulnerable roads, so we can have a clear discussion about what that existing work program is that Tony Avery was talking about, what this scoping work is that needs to be done and how we'll deal with that. Might identify additional work. And you'll need to make decisions around that, and how does that fit into this process, I think. We're going to make an allowance for it and vary it in the future, or we're going to allow nothing and vary it that way. So we'll come back with something on that if you want to grab that one. And I also we've already got Cody's point from the previous ones about presenting the information in a consumable way and in a visual way, so we can see what the investments actually look like in terms of the network. But we'll add that again so we don't forget about it. And yes,
At the very bottom, really widespread investment corrects deficits and largely future-proofs the network. We wipe out the infrastructure deficit, or we wipe out this portion of it. Is that what you're saying there? I know those are your words.
sorry, which words are these?
Aggressive, early widespread investment corrects deficits and largely future-proofs the network.
Well, I think if you think back to what you saw from NZTA earlier, when we talk about deficit in terms of transport, there's no situation for the future of Queenstown. We have no congestion, but you know, any major centre in New Zealand, that's true. The question is the extent of the problem that, as a community and as a council, that you're willing to carry. And so in Tony's view, that's the program that basically catches us up to the investment program that we've been saying we needed because of the growth for 10 years, but that has not been invested in. Yeah.
Okay, and so
And future proof
I'm-
catches us up.
I'm being rhetorical. Each one of these will have numbers next to it.
Yes.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, on the next slide. So we'll let Tony, I didn't have any other kind of follow-up points or follow-up work from that last discussion. Is there anything else that people think I've missed there before we move into pathways?
Well, I was just gonna, so the town centre stuff is aggressive, but the small Wanaka interventions is on that second tier, progressive, sorry. So, yeah, could just,
Well, we can just let Tony talk about, he'll
Oh,
walk
yeah,
through
okay.
to these pathways now. I was
Sorry.
just trying to pick up any actions from that last section before we move into this.
I'll just take a broad approach to park and ride, not just cars.
Oh, yes, yeah.
They want to,
I think, I mean, just to reflect, I mean, I do think we need to understand the real cost of fast track and if you can somehow separate the two pathways that with and without fast track so we can know what that looks like. I know that's not an easy task, but I'm just trying to continue to understand that. Anyway.
So these pathways are based on the growth scenario that we talked about 2 sessions ago. Yeah, so this is on that baseline growth, which isn't
It's the
minimum.
high-
It
the high-
doesn't incorporate whether
That's
there is any
It's just a demand.
reduced demand from fast track. It's based on the high plus. And
But
it's
the where
concentrated.
it occurs
Yep.
is as important
It's
as.
in line with that base. Yeah. So this is based on that scenario. So NZTA has looked at their program under that scenario and adding in the fast tracks. But ours isn't because we are looking at the spatial plan because that's what we are planning for.
So that was the question I asked before. So our program is a spatial plan driven approach,
Yes.
not a spatial plan plus.
Which is what you agreed in that previous
Yeah.
section.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
yeah,
the fast tracks are in the priority grade areas they're
No,
taken into
understood,
account. So
understood.
for example, the higher numbers on Ladies Mile are taken into account here.
but
The
that's
RTO,
within
yeah.
the scope of the spatial
Yes,
plan anyway. So that's
Yeah, so not totally greenfields off the point. Okay.
But it
So,
doesn't say how we're going to service Morganberry Road, for example, although Tony's had lots of discussions about that.
so it's interesting looking at the fast tracks applications and particularly the detailed ones that are coming through, that there is a significant emphasis on economic benefit because that's one of the criteria. And NZTA price in when they justify their investments or attempt to, the cost of congestion. Are we doing that here?
yes,
Cool.
we commissioned a discrete piece of work to support those responses through the fast track approach, which looks at identifying the net benefits,
Yeah.
cost of congestion, rather than the perceived or positive benefits that come in with the application. It's to look at what is the actual effect on the wider network in terms of economy, the economics of that, which puts a figure. on
Which
the
is, I think, necessary because some of those, even with the larger proposals, the total economic benefit contributing to GDP, etc., isn't actually very big. And when you look at the consequential impacts on communities, on congestion, on the environment, on infrastructure, if it's relevant, our own infrastructure or CCO infrastructure, it could easily be at least equal, if not more than the claimed economic benefit. Thanks for that.
So NZTA did that as part of their strategic network plan, and then Tony's taken, we've worked with NZTA and ORC to build on that to get a broader picture with some wider economic factors than what NZTA considered. So we've had a separate report on that.
Yep. Thank you.
Onto the pathways, how we achieve these, or how we achieve the program that's in front of us. My commentary so far is that this is all encompassed within the first 10 years. The ultimate figure is the same for the 2 main pathways here, which are the progressive and aggressive, but the reactive gives us that option, that minimal intervention, which is we are carrying on with the good work around GDM and parking management, but also where we have to respond, so point crossing, we have to factor that in. So for the other two, the progressive is really that we focus on what I consider to be the best value for money in the early stages, which would be to invest in Wanaka. For the same reasons we've discussed, getting in early, the behavioural change, the advocacy. Or the aggressive is then to recognise that we do have significant projects still there, and we need to work out feasibility and affordability of delivering significant major projects in a confined area in a condensed period. And that separates these pathways through. In terms of how that looks for how they respond to the significant issues we've identified and the feasibility of delivering them, we've identified the table in front of you. You see at the bottom, or sorry, on the left-hand side, the column adds up to 120 million. That's included in the figures on the middle and right-hand column. So that's included in both of those. Identifying down at the bottom as well, the continuous program and low-cost programs are outside or additional to this as well. This is for the improvements program.
And I think that's linking to the conversation we've been having about funding and financing. This program has a heavy growth component, so we would expect that when we get to that part of this, looking at the alternative tools and how you would recover through DCs and DLs, that there would be the ability to use those other tools to a significant extent. If you talk about the Queenstown Town Centre, if the reason that we need to do those projects is growth, which they won't all be growth, but if they are, then they may be projects that are not going to be funded by ratepayers and could be funded by those areas that they are supporting to grow. But that's, as we said before with the other elements of this, that step in terms of how that would be spread across growth and level service and therefore ratepayers versus alternative tools is yet to come.
Queenstown profile. You put your hand up, I jumped over.
Good.
Can you just contextualize progressive and aggressive between each other in terms of, like, I know they're the same cost, 650, yet say, progressive is around putting 50 million into Wanaka and aggressive is around Queenstown. But like both of them have Queenstown Town Centre and Tip at the bottom, which is about 480 million for both. So just to help daylight what the real difference is.
The difference is trying to understand what we get from each of these area bases or programs. There's a time opportunity in taking Wanaka forward in terms of the advocacy, the behavioural change, the sort of culture around transport and alternative transport, particularly, along with the timing of the regional council's public transport trials. There's a real opportunity to invest there. But what that does then is for everything else we're considering, it really condenses that period into a 6-year program, which makes it harder to implement because it's very resource hungry. We take it around to the aggressive, we look at some of the larger problems first and to set them in motion so that then we've got more of a spread over the rest of the 10-year period.
So it's more about what you focus on and the time and resource that you spend your energy on than it is about the actual capital projects.
It's the same investment in both. It's the order, the time.
It's the order of, things.
So just to flesh that out, so you go, okay, we're advocating for the bus service to come into Wanaka, but you need to implement the Dungarvan Street bus hub or whatever in order to respond to the bus thing. Is that the sort of?
It is, and if you look at the different interventions in Wanaka Upper Clues, they're around active travel, they're around capacity, they're around safety improvements at intersections to allowing that to grow with the town or before the town.
So if you put it in before those new areas grow, then those behaviours of using public transport, active transport will be embedded. Whereas if it's not there when they move in, they'll get used to driving everywhere, which is what we do here.
Yeah. It's hard not to see this as Queenstown and Wanaka.
Yeah.
And again, putting the numbers on it, it's like, if you were to argue the last 5 or 10 years, has it been aggressive or progressive? If we take an approach where we focus on,
It's been more reactive.
yeah,
Yeah, we
that's
have
true.
the opportunity, but I suppose the funding base is still ward-based for transport though, so this isn't, it's like you're not taking away something from Queenstown to give to Wanaka or vice versa, you're going, what's the capacity within each of those catchments to deliver the programs that they need? And they pay for them themselves.
Under the current model,
Yes.
yes, but that'll be something you start discussing on Thursday. In
And
terms
that'll
of
be
how
part of
might
that
come.
funding and financing thing as to whether that's the most efficient thing, but yeah, it's, anyway, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Because if it's,
This might be an Anita question. When Plan Change 50 was being put together, were those who were in support of it, did they anticipate that at some time in the relatively near future, they would possibly be having to contribute substantially to the provision of infrastructure and services to enable the exploitation of that opportunity?
well, I can sort of answer that. The short answer is yes, except they didn't anticipate it would be $300 million. They anticipated it would be $80 million. So, yeah, I mean, it's just this quantum.
So there's no surprise, though. They did anticipate that there would be a cost to them making the most of that opportunity made available to them and any future property owner.
I don't know whether it was explicit, but it was certainly that would have been the reality of it. But as I said, it was the quantum that changed.
Sure, that's
If there's any developer agreements that have different arrangements.
right. Okay, sure. Okay, that's interesting.
Don't know off the top of my head, I don't know if there are.
No, but that's life in Queenstown Lakes. Okay, thank you.
I don't think even Lakeview, which is a commercial undertaking, is still subject to development contributions and changing development contributions. They could increase significantly over the life of that development. You know, the quantum of that alone could be between 10 and 20 and $25 million in the total quantum of the development contributions recovered.
Quite, and not the least because the now, and we're seeing it now with the recent consent application, the anticipated use of that site is changing from a significant amount of residential accommodation to almost exclusively visitor accommodation of one sort or other. So and there should be more anticipation. I suggest that that growth should pay because it is adding demand to those aspects of our economy.
That's clearly why our policy is the most important piece of work in the LTP around how great.
Thank you. I just had to put that out there.
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
Nikki.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to know that with the information that we've got in front of us, I'm finding it really hard to pick between the options. Obviously, the word reactive isn't great, and it's a significantly lower investment, but remembering that these aren't our main roads and congestion points and so on. So I don't want to even discount reactive at this point. I actually want to understand the specific projects, the specific project costs, the debt headroom, that we have available, because we don't understand our context at the moment, to Quentin's point, and the funding and financing. Like, basically, what are you attributing to growth? What are you attributing to level of service? For this particular one, I can't pick between those three until I see that stuff. Other people may be able to.
Well,
To be honest, it's less important for this one than, well, sorry, that's not less important. This is the same investment program because reactive is included in progressive and aggressive, and progressive and aggressive have the same investments, just in different
sequences.
So the actual projects and the split between growth, etc., and how you might fund them is actually the same.
That'll be a choice we just have to make.
But I still want to see debt headroom matters if you're funding the much and that changes, and we just don't understand.
To model something to bring to you for that first discussion though, whether we are modelling progressive, which will include reactive, or aggressive, I think is something we need some direction on, but understanding that at that first session that can be explored in a lot more detail to potentially move things.
Yeah, I mean,
my instinct is this is our biggest deficit, probably our biggest deficit, and in order to get on top of it, I would need to be more aggressive, but how aggressive we are has to depend on those decisions.
I mean, you know, what is that actually achieving? What is the cost benefit? Who's paying all of that stuff?
The point is that we need to be more objective about how we make those decisions, because you know, we don't want to react to saying, I don't like that project, which we don't.
That's my point. Or I really like that project, you know, we need
we need to be objective about where the dollar's best spent and what things we prioritise. But I think overall, we've got a massive deficit in this space and we need to be as aggressive as possible.
So I don't think there's any question from any of you that Wanaka is good value for money to get ahead of the problems in Wanaka. What aggressive adds to progressive is it brings other things forward as well. Yeah,
I
Tony?
think you need to add the word proactive as not just.
So I don't think there's
one of these, because proactive is the bit that you're trying to be in Wanaka. Yeah.
So there's possibly nothing lost if we model progressive. Because all aggressive would do is, if you are convinced by some of those projects, when we bring the next layer of detail, you could give us direction to move those forward. Yeah.
Well, what's the bill around the room? Yeah, I mean, do you support being aggressive or progressive? Yeah, sure.
And apologies for late. And apologies also if I've missed something, which I obviously have. But not Paul Henry's announcement that he's running as an MP, right?
Oh,
sorry. Yeah. Just thought I'd share that. But no. So I'm picking up obviously the Wanaka-based intervention. It's really key to do that sooner rather than later. So, but what I'm seeing on the chart is that the aggressive is actually going to pull that down the list. It's actually going to come in later years. So how do we have an aggressive plan which actually still maintains that Wanaka investment in those first 3 years, or is it just simply not possible?
I think we've modelled the interventions in Wanaka over a 10 or more year period already. If that was the worst case, they would still do what we've identified to part of a business case process. The advantage in condensing that to 6 years to 3 years is where the real benefit is. So if that's a part of the mix that, okay, we'll do Wanaka in 6 years rather than 3 years, then that spreads it across.
It's interesting because the program business case had three categories, like the NZTA, had three different lines of priorities and things, but they were they had times against them. And what this is doing is removing the timeline and saying how much do you compress the program.
But how does that drive the costs up? Because you're pushing it all into one, you know, so.
Well, that's the bit we don't understand yet.
Yeah, well, this is my point. It's, you know, in terms of supply and demand, if you're trying to do it all at once, plus we always over budget our capital. We always think we can do more. We always try to overachieve and we always underachieve, which ultimately means people have paid for stuff that they don't get. It worries me. We need to think about what's practically achievable. As well as all the other things that I've sort of suggested.
Until we get this. I think we need to give direction. I mean, it's easy to fall.
Before we do that, just if I can. So, Tony, you said earlier that those projects, that particularly the arterial later stages, the projects are still there. I wonder again if we need to sort of step back. So, kind of what Nikki's suggesting, that in fact, the need and the opportunities and increasing demand are still there. In fact, demand is increasing, in particular, if some relatively extreme fast track applications get any legs. So therefore, but meanwhile, we're talking about alternative means of transport and multimodal transport. Maybe those arterial projects in their previous form, maybe we've moved on. Maybe there's an opportunity to say, well, how can we do that smarter with someone else's money?
To be fair, I'd hope that the strategic network review would have informed some of those things to determine, but
sure,
we haven't seen the full thing.
I think that informs.
It didn't appear to have, but I mean, as to what's the most, it comes back to that same principle, what's the most efficient way to achieve the highest outcomes? And that, as you say, it may or may not.
So in that sense, I would like us to aggressively pursue alternative options to solve the problems that our communities have now and in the future.
Yeah, that's a good point, rather than just relying on the fact that we had the right solution some years ago.
Yeah,
And
we
we're
had excellent.
pursuing the same agenda, you know?
We have to test them. but
Sure. Yeah, don't just
Don't
don't just go
assume
for
anything.
anything.
Yeah. But anyway, I mean, look, as I said, coming back to the thing, so it's easy to fall to the middle. And that's sort of the direction that we're getting. But what I want is a sense from the councillors as to whether you want aggressive or progressive.
I hands down would be in favor of aggressive, and that probably puts me in a minority. But I'd also like to somehow see, because obviously it's going to be the most expensive, how in a perfect world we could pay for that in a world of rate capping through development contributions, development levies, IDL debt tax, user charges, LGFA funds.
And that'll be the question, how fast can we move, Mel?
I'm also supportive of aggressive, but I have to admit I don't completely understand the difference. So, yeah.
Gavin?
Go together.
I mean, yeah, me too. I thought aggressive might have been progressive with just more added into it, so you're spending more in those first 3 years. And then less in the last 6 years or 7 years.
Yeah.
It's sort of a similar amount in the last 7 years. And only slightly more in the first 3 years.
Yeah.
CapEx expenditure anyway.
Cody?
Well, on behalf of my community, they've been calling for not being Queenstown, making early interventions, being proactive. That's what they want to spend their money on. They feel like that there's been a lot of attention in the Queenstown CBD, and we've been born as a consequence of that over years, a lack of focus. So I'm excited to see that reprioritisation towards it.
So you're aggressive? Progressive, right. John?
Aggressive, including Monica.
Okay, John? Yeah, not that. Okay, that's Nikki?
I'm progressive as well. I just don't think I think we're trying to bite off more than we can chew, and I think, you know, it's important things will get deferred. I just don't think, I honestly can't make the call between the two. Yes, of course we need to be aggressive about, you know, dealing with transport issues, but let's ignore the words for a second. What projects are happening in what time frame, and how much is it costing us, and what's the headroom? Come on, give us a bit more information before we commit to a path.
We're not committing to a path, we're giving a sense of direction.
Well, I'm progressive, because I just think we're going more than we can.
Okay, and I'm aggressive. I think, as I said, with the biggest sector of deficit we've got is in transport. We have to at least set the benchmark. I've got no doubt this will be tempered and pulled back. So we may as well start at a point where we are aspirational and work backwards from there once we have the figures. So anyway, does that help?
So where did that land in terms of
Aggressive.
aggressive? Okay, so just to answer your question though, Gavin, the difference isn't the quantum in the first 3 years, it's the projects. Yeah, so in the progressive, it has the Wanaka optimisation heavily invested in those first 3 years, which gives you a lot of the Wanaka program, whereas in aggressive, it gives you all the pre-planning for the Queenstown Town Centre for approximately the same money, but it's mostly design, land acquisition, pre-implementation stages, not delivery of the projects.
Can I just a quick question about where our town? Sorry,
They're in both. It's in both.
No, but the timing about this bridge between the two options.
First 3 years in both.
Okay.
So we're choosing between creating actual interventions or more plans.
Yeah,
And we're just present.
I struggle with that because actually I think all the projects, are key. I don't think we know who might pay for them.
Yeah.
You know, which ones we have to pay for.
Yeah.
And which ones we would pay for if no one else was paying for them. But you know, that opportunity cost of not taking the Wanaka stuff forward is significant, right? So
I'm going to go out on a limb and say we can model both.
Progressive.
It's the same projects. It's the same project.
Yeah, I think it's almost a blended model.
She's loving it. She loves it.
Look at it.
I mean, there was a question about our bridge there. I mean, that's reminded that's not in our program. That's in NZTO's program.
No, she was.
No, at this point.
At this point, sorry. Okay,
Cool.
whereas that one is. But look, that's going to be an interesting. It started out at $20 million. It's probably at $50 or $60 million, and even NZTA agreed that it's probably $100 and $120 million project. So we're going to have to be super careful about how we. It's an incredibly complex and difficult bridge to build. So
You know,
It feels very ambitious.
I was going to say, though, the big end of this conversation quite often comes back to, you know, we can put in money and plan to do things, but what the market can actually do.
Exactly.
What planning can be done.
Well, and I'll be completely upfront, so I don't think we should be delivering that bridge. I think we somehow need to find a way to get NZTA to deliver that bridge. They're way more enabled to deliver a project like that than we are.
Agree. Already having those sort of discussions for all the NZTA up to that. There's a variety of different ways it can be delivered. You have to go through that.
Yeah.
But major bridge construction, I've got experience.
Notwithstanding,
But we need to also fund a big chunk of it all. But so the delivery of the bridge is separate from timing and funding.
Yeah.
But delivery of the bridge needs to be thought through carefully in terms of what's the most efficient piece of getting it done. So
Yep. Cool. So anyway, I think
So I've
that,
taken an extra action, which is to think about the practically achievable. So I guess that's the size of the program, but that's going to depend on if it's split between, anyway. So we'll do something there.
that's not always a build we're going to put the LDP through anyway,
Yeah.
but at least we've got to make sure that it's not a $400 million program in year one, because clearly that.
Audit will get you.
Well, it just doesn't happen. We've ran into that problem 9 years ago or something, where we had a front loaded LTP and we couldn't deliver it. So it's, but anyway, lunchtime now, and I'll hand back over to John after lunch so he can pick back up. But
Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'm sorry.
No, I think let's
cold, wet.
I've got a really official.
Oh, yes, you're right.
To me, that was the trouble. Yeah, I know, but I was just thinking early in the process. Yeah, I mean, that's fine, but never get that.